I am Ray, and if you haven't seen my channel before, I am a homeschooling mom of two. This year we used a curriculum called BookShark, which is a literature-focused curriculum, and let me tell you, it is thorough, like really thorough. I was learning things right alongside my son that I didn't even learn in high school or college. There is the chance that I might have just forgotten it, but a lot of it I did not learn. So I have to say, I'm extremely impressed with this curriculum. It's amazing. If you can afford it, if you can make the payments, I would say do it. But today I was going to talk about 7 of my favorite books that I've read in this curriculum. So BookShark actually has many different levels that you can choose from when you are looking to buy a curriculum. This year I chose level D for my son. He's in 3rd grade, and based on the recommendations, they would say that that's a little early. They might recommend 4th grade or 5th grade for that, but I knew that he could do it. So we ordered level D, and we got the advanced readers package. And so there are going to be some books that I show you that are in the advanced readers package that are not in the regular package. But I gotta be honest, I pretty much got the advanced readers because I wanted to challenge my son, but really there was one book that I wanted to read. So here we go. These books that I'm reading, I'm going to talk about in chronological order, not in my books by favorite, if that makes sense. I will tell you, however, which is one of my favorite, although I think I might have more than one. So you'll just have to see which ones I get a little bit more excited about. So the first book that I read that I was actually surprised I enjoyed was Peacemaker. So Peacemaker is in the curriculum. It's one of the first books you will read in level D. I wasn't too keen on this. I grew up in Washington State, and I've lived here my whole life, and part of the requirements in Washington State was that we needed to learn about Native American history. And while I have respect for that, it wasn't my favorite part of history to learn about. I always lean towards, English history, like medieval England type. And so American history itself, which is what level D is. Level D is American History 1. It was not appealing to me, but it's something that I felt was important that my son would need to learn. What I discovered when I was going through this is that I was, as an adult, relearning some things that I knew, being exposed to things that I didn't, and found that I was actually enjoying the stories. So this is one of those ones that I was actually very surprised. I enjoyed the story. It tells a fictionalized version of real events that happened about the Iroquois people in early North America. And if you don't know, one of the things that I found interesting that I really remembered from this book, because you read these books and then you just start Googling, even when the kid's not around, and you just start going down the rabbit hole and you realize, oh, the United States was heavily based off of the people in this book. Very interesting. Peacemaker is a short read, and I'd say it's worth it. Yeah, don't count it out. The second book that you'll run into that you'll need to read, this is a read aloud book, is The Sign of the Beaver. I had never heard of this book before, but it had been written quite a while ago. It's a Newbery Honor book, and I actually really enjoyed this too. In this one, you get more of a frontiersman vibe, and it's all about a little boy whose father has to leave to go bring his mother and his sister back to the new cabin that they've built to live in. And it turns out that, some not too great events happen, and the boy's left all by himself, and he might not have enough food to live. So he ends up befriending a Native American little boy who helps him along the way, and they become good friends. Now, there's a lot more in there to really think about and learn about, but this is also a short read. It's like 133 pages or something. I thought it was a really nice story, and it makes you think a lot. In these books, you also find supplemental aspects of historical events, how they lived. These are all things that your child can think about when they're learning about these time periods, and it hopefully make them emotionally connect to this historical time period, because at least for me, I'm not one of those people that can really remember dates, but I find interest in the stories of the people and picturing myself and running the movies in my head, and that's what's really great about these books. The next book you'll read as a read aloud in BookShark D is going to be The Witch of Blackbird Pond. Sounds creepy, sounds spooky. I promise you there's absolutely no witches in the book, so don't worry about it. It's purely historical. They actually won the Newbery Medal for contribution to children's literature. And this book is about a girl named Kit who lived on an island in the South. And she lived with her wealthy grandfather and lived a very privileged life in the 1700s or so. She ends up, maybe it was the 1600s. It's been a little while since I read the book. But she ends up leaving because her grandfather dies, and the only family she has left lives in the colonies. So she goes to live with her aunt and surprises them. They don't know she's coming. She ends up finding that life is very different in a Puritan type society, and she ends up, because she is so different, she sticks out like a sore thumb and ends up being accused of witchcraft. Now, this book in particular, I think would bring up a lot of conversations, good conversations you could have with your kid about how things used to be like, what it was like for people who were very, very religious back then, how things are different now. I think this one vividly pictures, that it wasn't exactly, people viewed, the Americas as a place to make your fortune, live a new life, but it didn't always end up being that way. Sometimes it was a surprise that wasn't so great. There's also a little bit of romance and a story of some unexpected friendship. Okay, this next book, this one is for sure an advanced reader program book. I'm not even sure that I was supposed to read this one. This might have been like a reader and not a read aloud, but I did read it aloud, so I don't even know. Anyway, this is why I wanted to order the advanced readers, because I read this book. It said, Mr. Revere and I. Being an account of certain episodes in the career of Paul Revere, Esquire, as revealed by his horse. It's literally the horse narrating the whole story about Paul Revere, which I thought was really funny sounding, and I really wanted to read it, and I did. So I ordered the advanced readers. Growing up in school, I did not learn about Paul Revere. I went to elementary school in the 90s in Washington State, and I even remember Paul Revere coming up at some point, and my dad being in the room at home, and him just going, wait a minute, you know Paul Revere, right? One of by land, two of by sea, and me just smiling and nodding, be like, sure I do, Dad. Literally nobody ever taught me anything. And while there's a lot of misinformation that goes around about Paul Revere, and the famous poem is relatively inaccurate, it is something that I think that kids should know about. It's such a good entryway into learning about the American Revolution and what happened, and I think that they should know. And so I wanted to know too, and I read the book, and this was a good way to do it. I will say that this book I think was written in the 50s, and I've read enough children's books from that time period to know that the language that they use, they spoke differently, and so the language is a little bit more challenging, I would say, even for some adults to understand. So maybe if you approach this book, you have to really think about what the horse is saying, because she makes a ton of jokes. There's a ton of jokes in this book. It's hilarious. And it's going to go over the kids' heads. So you have to kind of explain it to them. But it's definitely a very good book, very funny. And it does include, facts. Like, a lot of people think it was just Paul Revere that rode. Well, he didn't. There was him and two other people that rode. And he didn't even make it all the way. He got caught. So that's in this book. I enjoyed it a lot. I think it's very humorous if you can stand the language that's used in it. Now, this next one that's coming up, I really enjoyed. This is actually a reader, which is what the child is supposed to read by themselves. But I decided I was actually going to read it before my kid, which was good. It's a very, very short read. This is another older book. It's been reprinted years after years. If you've not heard of the Landmark book series, they have a lot of very good historical books about historical figures. If you're a person to judge a book by its cover, I always have, even though they tell you not to, this looks really boring to me. Like, I would not want to read it. I picked it up anyways, because you know what? It's one of those things. I didn't learn about Ben Franklin in school. I knew he was a guy, I knew he wasn't a president, and I knew he was on the $100 bill. This book, in Easy language for young children to understand. I would say it's appropriate for a 2nd to 3rd grade level. Tells about all of his accomplishments and how he's still relevant today from his inventions that he created. Like he invented a lot of things you guys don't even realize. And they're still around today, or some form of them are still around. Sayings that he made popular, and exactly what he did, how influential he was in the United States actually becoming a country. This guy, they should be teaching about him. Like every historical figure, I'm sure there's downsides. This book talks him up a lot. There's downsides for sure, but major contribution to where we are today in society as a whole. Kind of insane if you read this. So, book looks boring, but I learned a lot, and so did my son, and it sparked a lot of conversations. Okay, my next book in my list, there are books, remember, this is just the ones that I liked the most that I've read. We've actually read a lot more. I'll have to make another video about all the books that are in BookShark Level D, but this one I was excited about because I had an idea. I had never heard of it before, and I read the back and I was like, this is weird. This is just about some random kid that's not real, and he's interacting with actual historical figures in the American Revolution. By the point we get to this book in BookShark, my kid was just obsessed with the American Revolution. He just thought it was so cool, the history, how amazing it was. They were able to fight back against the English. Yeah. So I did my best to make it more exciting for him, and so we started reading this. Before I read it, maybe a week or two before I started reading it, my dad came over and visited, and he said, hey, I got this book. I think so-and-so would really like to read. About a week or two before we read this book, my dad came over and he said to me, hey, I've got a book I think my son would really like to read. And I said, oh yeah, what's it called? And he says, Johnny Tremaine. Oh really? I say to him. He's like, oh, you know it? I was like, no, I've never read it, but I think it's this one. And I grab it off the shelf and I show him. So this is a book that when my dad was a boy that he read, and he said he read it over and over and over again. My dad likes history too. So maybe it runs in the family, I don't know. And so he really talked it up. And I ended up, after that, I was like, well, this must have been kind of popular around that time when my dad was young. So I Googled it, and it was a movie. They turned the book into a movie. I did end up watching the movie with my son. They change a lot. It's still a fun movie, but they change a lot of the book. This book, I had a lot of fun reading. It was very entertaining. You get really drawn into the characters. However, it was written in, I want to say, like the 40s. So it's a time period where it was okay to use words that are not okay to use now. And there are notes in the BookShark curriculum warning you about things when they say certain things in books that, maybe you aren't ready to talk about with your kid, or maybe you are and you need to have that discussion about why it's not okay to say these things today and why this was wrong. Just be aware, this is a great story. It has an amazing character development. It has an amazing connection to history, and it really, 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 really gets, like I said before, that emotional connection for the children to history so they can really picture themselves in the story. And that gets them to remember what they learned in history class, that emotional connection. But just be prepared to have those discussions if you need them. And the last book that I have on the list today, we are actually not done with yet. We're almost at the end of the year, the curriculum, but we have one more chapter in this book, and I think I'm okay with talking about it because I saw this book and I told you it's almost instinctual, right? They tell you not to judge a book by its cover. I always do, always have. But when I was young, I had a librarian once tell me, even if you don't like the cover, pick up the book, read it for 20 pages. And if after the 20 pages you don't like it, then put it down. And so I've kind of lived by that rule ever since. So this book looked super boring to me. It's called Carry On, Mr. Bowditch. I Googled, I was like, hey, is there a movie to go along with this one too? No, there's not. There was like a 1950s TV special they made, but I could not track that down or anything, so we just have been reading it together. I've never been interested in sailing or anything like that, but we read the book, and within the first chapter or so, I was like, wait a second, this is interesting. So this is about and you know, this book in particular is interesting because this is a fictionalized biography. So you go online and people say it's a biography. It's a fictionalized biography. It's like biography mixed with made-up stuff. So the author thoroughly researched this man named Nathaniel Bowditch, who was a very important figure in naval navigation. And it turns out they call him Nat throughout the book. He was a total math whiz. Amazing, very smart, very good at math. And it tells the story of his life and how he got to be where he is. Talks about missed opportunities he had. He always wanted to go to college, but he just couldn't make it because he had other responsibilities to take care of. And in the end, he contributes one of the most important things he can to sailing, which is like a book that he created. It's a massive guide that you can usually find on ships today because it's just that important of a book to have around. Really kind of the authority on ocean navigation there. But in this book, obviously, so it's a fictionalized biography, so it's filled with facts and real things that happen, but the author fills in dialogue things that she's made up to convey the story. But it's very interesting because she's done her research. So if while you're reading this, you'll pick up on random facts like, why is something called a logbook a logbook? Okay? If you read this, you will find out why they call a logbook a logbook. And it's crazy because there's an actual log involved. Anyway, that's just one of the examples. So that is my 7 favorite books from BookShark Level D so far. And I hope that if those sound good to you, that you will really consider this curriculum for your children. Again, I think it's probably one of the most thorough curriculums I've seen in the 6-ish, 7-ish years I've been doing this. It's more thorough than anything I learned in my high school. It's more thorough than anything I'd learned in my history classes in college. So I would seriously consider it. But again, curriculums need to match your kid. Part of the reason for homeschooling is that you're trying to match your child. You're not trying to fit your child into something else. So if your child is interested in reading and loves books, is completely enthusiastic, because there are a lot of books in a literature-based curriculum, and if they're interested in history, then this is probably for you. And if you want your child to learn about American history, why things are the way they are, and how we got to where we are today, then they need that foundation. And that's what BookShark Level D does, at least for me and my kids. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you guys next time.